Representatives last week on a 404-6 vote. The bill in the Senate, hr1959, aims to push the same bill through and make it law, and I want to say a few things about it. Local representatives Randy Cool, Republican, Tom Reynolds, Republican, Jim Walsh, Republican, and Democrat Louise Slaughter all voted to approve this bill almost without discussion. This bill would create a national commission on the prevention of violent radicalization and homegrown terrorism to gather information on the activities of American citizens to determine whether their beliefs might encourage, quote, ideologically based violence to advance political, religious, or social change. This commission is reminiscent of the House Un-American Activities Committee of the 1950s, which blacklisted political activists and deported suspected communist sympathizers. Despite the Bush administration's repeated contentions and warnings that terrorism is brewing at home, and the repeated announcements of sleeper cells and the like, only a handful of so-called domestic terrorists have ever been brought to trial, let alone convicted. Today, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments by federal prosecutors and attorneys for over 300 of the 600-plus so-called enemy combatants currently being held at Guantanamo Bay. They're hearing arguments about whether they even have the right to challenge their detention. Currently, those detainees have no rights to challenge their detention, and with many having been held for over 6 years. The Bush administration has indicated it has no intention of proving their guilt or innocence anytime soon. Bush on the one hand claims that the terrorists hate our freedoms, but on the other seems hell-bent on taking away as many as he can here at home. In reality, our government as a whole has shown a dismal record of corruption and abuse of power, from warrantless wiretapping, the Patriot Act, and legalizing torture, black sites, and so-called secret rendition. All the while, congressional leaders from both parties have at best sat idly by, and at worst been complicit in these abuses. With this new legislation, it seems that rather than admitting that the war on terror has failed to produce any significant results and failed to make Americans safer, they would rather move the goalposts and broaden the definition of terrorism. Furthermore, this legislation contributes to a culture that aims to demonize law-abiding Arab and Muslim Americans, thus painting them all as potential terrorists. This has an effect of intimidating them and preventing them from exercising their constitutionally protected rights to criticize this U.S. government that conducts brutal wars across the world and many in their home countries. Washington believes the best way to fight terrorism and the best ways to lower violence, to lower casualties, and troop deaths in Iraq is not to round up as many potential terrorists as possible, not to round up our citizens, is not to invade and occupy foreign countries, it is not to support dictators around the world, it is to reverse these very policies. Specifically, we call for the immediate removal of all U.S. combat forces and private contractors from Iraq and reparations to the Iraqi people for the damage we've caused. Our country has a history of criminalizing constitutionally protected rights of free speech, such as the Alien and Sedition Acts of World War I, the McCarthyist witch hunts of the 1950s, COINTELPRO of the 1960s and 70s, which jailed and persecuted civil rights activists and anti-war activists. But our country also has a proud tradition of standing up for free speech, even if such speech does not please or even contradicts and opposes the people in power. Rochester Against War stands in this tradition. We urge Senator Clinton and Senator Schumer to defend the freedom of speech, to stand with those who want freedom of speech in this country for Arabs and Muslims and all citizens, freedom to dissent, freedom to oppose this government, to oppose this war, to oppose the policies of the U.S. government when we deem them unacceptable, and we urge them to vote no on Senate Bill 1959. Thank you.